At about 2 in the morning, aside from a few faint lights down the hall, the place was cloaked in shadow. I could only make out dark shapes in my cramped 10 by 10 cell. I lay there on my back, hands behind my head, thoughts running wild. Sleep wasn't coming. Instead, my mind drifted to memories I'd rather bury. Footsteps echoed in the distance, so I began counting each one. 7, 8, 9, 10. And then he came into view. His expression was as blank and hardened as everyone else's here, just another guy clocking his rounds, not here to make friends. I wasn't sure if he even noticed me, but it didn't matter. He was on the outside, and I was locked in here. Once he'd passed by, I stopped counting. Pointless anyway. He wouldn't be back for another hour and a half. I stared up at the ceiling, mentally counting down the days. Just 5 more days, plus a wake-up, and I'd finally be out. After 7 months of a 1-year sentence, my release was close. My job was ready for me, but everything else had changed. My brother had been looking after my house, fixing my car, and keeping what was left of my savings in check. Was I still angry? Angry didn't begin to cover it, but I shoved those feelings down. In here, anger eats at you. I'd seen guys doing 10, 20 years, men who came out shells of themselves, any shred of humanity left outside the prison gates. Here, it was survival, though this place was almost cushy compared to the hellish facility up north. Closing my eyes, I tried to get a few hours of sleep, but I couldn't help missing my old room with its blackout shades. Yet I knew life would never return to the way it was. My brother Jack had promised to pick me up next Tuesday. During our last visit, separated by that cold plexiglass wall, he'd asked, "Anything special you want to eat that night?" I didn't hesitate. "A steak. Big one. Medium rare." He chuckled. "Alex, you're too easy. I figured you'd ask for something a bit harder to slip past my wife. You'll stay with Sam and me until you're settled. Your place is basically empty. No food, no furniture, so you can take some time to get what you need. It's not luxury, but it's clean, and you'll have your freedom." He smiled. I didn't. "Thanks," I started to say, but he cut me off. "Forget it. We're family. That's what family does. Don't worry about Mom and Dad. They'll come around when things calm down." But we both knew that would take a while. Feelings ran deep all around. "Seen my kids lately?" I asked. "A couple weekends ago, over at Mom and Dad's. Emma's the same, but Ryan's got this ridiculous bowl cut. It's in style or something." I told him it looked awful. You know what he said? He looked me in the eye and said I wasn't his dad, so I didn't have a say. Would have smacked some sense into him, but Mom was there. You'll have a handful with that one. Even though I was their father, Emma and Ryan would be staying with their mom after I got out. But I had time, plenty of it. Once I was free, I'd wait, choose my moment carefully. No need to rush. The divorce was final, but I still owned half the house. Rachel owed me about $65,000 to buy me out. She'd probably drained our lockbox and grabbed our bonds and CDs, but I'd listed everything with my lawyer. Once I got out, there'd be no more surprises from her. Rachel and Tom had blindsided me once, but I wouldn't let it happen again. I was here, waiting, remembering everything, and looking forward to better days. Only then could I piece my life back together. Before all this, I had no clue anything was wrong. Some of our so-called friends dropped vague hints, but they never told me the truth. Did they honestly think I knew and was somehow okay with it? Ridiculous. They all must have known, though. Looking back, it was obvious. I would never have allowed it if I'd had even a hint. In my mind, Rachel and I had a good marriage, 12 years, 2 kids, a nice home, steady jobs. We'd had our disagreements, sure, but I'd never imagined she'd pull something like this. Our social circle was small, just a handful of couples from the neighborhood, all married at least 7 years with 2 kids, except for Tom and Linda. They'd been trying for a child for years with no luck. Rachel probably knew why, but I steered clear of their issues. About a year ago, Linda took up heavy drinking. She started off just a little down, but eventually things got ugly. Tom barely touched alcohol, probably because he spent most of his time dragging her home. "Tom, sweetheart, give me another drink," she demanded at the beginning of the night. By the end, she'd be ordering him around, totally out of it. He'd have to carry her home. Sad, but it was his problem, not mine. Linda was a disaster tonight. I said while getting ready for bed. I think she passed out more than once. Mark and Lisa probably bolted early after she started undressing and asked Mark for help. No one was letting her near the pool. My wife, though, had a different perspective. I feel for Tom, she said. Linda's devastated over not having kids, but she's just using him as her punching bag. I told her she should adopt, but she won't consider it. She's convinced it's all Tom's fault. They'll either work it out or split, I replied. We're supposed to have dinner with them next week, but I'm not holding my breath that she'll behave. I'll talk to her this week, my wife said, trying to sound hopeful. Maybe she'll keep it together for one night. But Linda didn't even come close. Waiter, how's a girl supposed to get a drink around here? She yelled, her words blending into a slur. She was all over Tom again, who looked like he was at his breaking point. I jumped in before things escalated. Linda, come on, you owe me a dance, I said, pulling her toward the dance floor. She resisted, but I didn't give her a choice. We danced through 3 songs while my wife stayed back with Tom, who looked utterly defeated. As we neared the hallway, Linda mumbled something about needing the ladies' room. I waited, giving her a few minutes, but then I got concerned. I stopped 2 women going in and asked if they'd check on her. They came back with bad news. Is she wearing a bright yellow dress? One of the women asked, glancing out from the restroom. I nodded, and she sighed. She's passed out in one of the stalls. I can stand guard while you go in. I walked in, found her slumped by the sink, and splashed some cold water on her face. She perked up briefly, only to collapse again. Practically carrying her, I managed to get Linda back to our table. Tom, let me help you get her to the car. She's completely out, and she's not waking up soon. There I was, supporting a completely wasted Linda while Tom looked on, embarrassed and seething. Alex, I got it. Sit down. This isn't the first time, but it'll be the last. Despite his resistance, I got Linda to the car while he grabbed her purse and said his goodbyes. I laid her across the back seat, giving Tom a reassuring pat on the shoulder. I'm sorry, man. I really am. What else could I say? Thanks for the help. I don't know what to do anymore, he muttered. You two need counseling, Tom. You're not going to work this out alone. If you need us, call Rachel and me. We're here to help. He nodded, but I knew he didn't mean it. Whatever they had going on seemed way too deep to fix. I figured they had a couple of months left, tops, and sadly, I wasn't far off. 3 weeks later, on a Thursday night just past 10:30, we heard sirens and saw flashing lights at the end of our block. Like everyone else, I ran outside to see what was going on. Rachel, stay here. I'll check it out, I said, joining the growing crowd. The fire rescue team was prying open a car door. Is it Tom? Is he okay? I asked someone nearby. It's not Tom, it's Linda. They were fighting. She grabbed his keys, bolted, and took off down the street. Didn't make it far, though. She'd crashed into a parked car, hitting it at about 40 miles per hour. The ambulance arrived and loaded her onto a stretcher, with Tom right beside her. Their front door was wide open, lights on, and the whole place looked like a war zone. I phoned Rachel, filled her in, then locked up Tom's house, leaving a note with his keys. How's Linda? Rachel asked when I got home. Not good, I said. She wasn't wearing a seatbelt and swerved before she hit the car. The airbag went off, but she smacked her head on the window so hard it shattered. She was doing at least 35. Tom was with her at the hospital. Should we go down there? She asked. Let's wait till morning. He's got his hands full right now. We tried to sleep, but thoughts of Linda kept us awake. The next morning, around 11, my phone rang. Alex, Linda's on life support, my wife cried. I'm leaving work. Tom's falling apart. Someone needs to be with him. Meet me at the hospital. Poor guy couldn't catch a break. I grabbed some food on the way for the 3 of us and arranged for Rachel's parents to pick up our kids from school. When I arrived at the hospital, my wife and a few others were comforting Tom in the waiting room. How's she holding up? I asked in a low voice. My wife's eyes were full of worry. Not good. The doctor spoke with Tom, and he's barely said a word since. I walked over and sat next to him. Tom, you hanging in there? It was a dumb question, but I needed something to start with. Alex, she's not going to recover. There's barely any brain activity. I don't know what to do, he said, his voice breaking as he started to cry. I signaled the others to give us some space. Have her parents been told? I asked. They're on their way, he replied. But the hospital keeps asking about a living will and a donor card. Feels like vultures circling, he said bitterly. They even asked if I'd pull the plug if she's brain dead. She's my wife, not a piece of meat, he shouted, his frustration boiling over. Why can't they just fix her? Isn't that their job? I didn't have an answer. When Linda's parents arrived, they joined Tom in her room, and we could hear the outbursts of grief. Her father was blaming Tom, as if he'd driven her to this. After about 20 minutes, they all filed out, Linda's parents crushed by the finality, knowing they'd never see their daughter again. We left the hospital around 8 that evening and picked up the kids from Rachel's parents. The whole way home, I kept thinking, God, I hope I never have to make a choice like that. 2 days later, with Tom, Linda's parents, and the doctor in the room, they turned off the machine. Linda passed quietly, and we did our best to console Tom. Despite everything, he had loved her deeply. Funerals are strange. They bring out the best memories, glossing over the hard times. Linda's service was packed, and everyone was in tears. Tom was devastated and took a month off to stay with his family back east. I promised him we'd keep an eye on his place while he was gone. That night, while getting ready for bed, I looked over at my wife. You know I love you, right? It had been an exhausting few weeks, and I was grateful life was finally settling down again. If I'm ever like Linda, just don't keep me alive on a machine, okay? I wouldn't want that. Rachel shook her head. Alex, don't even think like that. It could never happen to us. Tom returned a few weeks later, trying to pick up the pieces of his life. Rachel spent months helping Tom sort through Linda's things. Slowly, he seemed to come to terms with her loss. We made sure he was included in social gatherings, and neighbors even set him up on dates, though none went anywhere. Life moved on, or so I thought. 6 months later, Tom seemed to regain his spark, and seeing him happy again felt like a relief. But looking back, I wonder if I missed obvious signs. Rachel and I were still close, but something had shifted. Although we were physically involved, there was a distance between us. Finally, I decided to ask her about it. Rachel, is something on your mind? I asked. No, Alex, everything's fine, she replied with a quick smile. Maybe you're just not getting enough attention. If you want more, just ask, she joked, using the word lovemaking, a term I'd never heard her use before. It felt strange, but I brushed it off, unaware of what was coming. Then came Friday, August 20th, a day I'll never forget. That morning, Rachel called me at work, saying the kids would be at her parents' for the weekend and asked when I'd be home. I'll get there early. Need me to pick up anything? I asked. No, just let me know when you're on your way, she replied, her tone almost casual. On the drive home, I pictured a quiet weekend together. But when I pulled into the driveway and saw 2 cars, a strange dread hit me. One of the cars was Tom's. I opened the door and walked in. Hey, honey, I'm home, I called, expecting a normal evening. But Rachel and Tom stood in the kitchen, both looking tense. Alex, we need to talk, Rachel said, barely meeting my eyes. Go ahead, I said, choosing to stand. What's this about? Alex, she began, clearly struggling. I wanted you to hear from me before you get the papers. What papers? I asked, my confusion turning into dread. Divorce papers, she whispered. The words hit like a blow. Divorce papers? Rachel, what are you talking about? Alex, Tom interjected, but I cut him off with a glare. Tom, keep out of this. This is between me and my wife. I snapped, and then the truth hit me. I looked at them both, feeling sick. Tom, leave. Now. My fist clenched as I tried to hold myself together. Rachel, you and I need to talk. Now. Tom, stay, she insisted, her voice trembling. Alex, this involves him too. Tom, get out, or I'll make sure you leave in a body bag, I said, teeth gritted. He finally backed down, walking toward the door. I turned back to Rachel, my voice barely controlled. Rachel, we need to talk. There's nothing left to say, Alex. I'm in love with Tom. I am sorry. You tramp. How long has this been going on? Since before Linda died? Tom stopped, fury in his eyes. Alex, you don't understand, he started, but I cut him off. Oh, I understand perfectly, I spat. While I was helping you, you were sleeping with my wife. Get out of my house, both of you. Alex, it's my house too, Rachel countered defensively. Not anymore. Leave? I replied, seething. She wavered. I'll come back for my things later. No, you'll leave now. Rachel, let's go, Tom said, guiding her toward the door. I couldn't resist a final jab. Yeah, go ahead. Listen to him. She looked back, a little shaken. I'll come back for my things when you've calmed down, Alex. By then, you'll be dead, I muttered. Once they left, I lost it. Grabbing a couple of beers, I tore through the house, ripping apart anything that reminded me of her. I threw Rachel's things onto the lawn and turned on the sprinklers, soaking everything she owned. Then I locked up, drinking until I passed out on the couch. The next morning, her things were gone, and the sight of the empty, wet lawn only added to my anger. I didn't call anyone to explain, figuring the neighbors already knew. When I tried calling Rachel's parents to speak to the kids, her mother picked up and immediately shut me down. Alex, she already picked them up last night, she said curtly. Come on, Fran. She was only here last night to grab her things. Let me talk to my kids. I insisted, but she hung up and ignored all my calls after that. Furious, I canceled all our joint credit cards and withdrew as much cash as possible. After a quick breakfast, I listed out my plans. Change the garage code, buy new locks, and move anything valuable to Jack's place. Just as I was about to leave, the doorbell rang. I checked the peephole and saw a man holding a large envelope. The divorce papers, I figured. He lingered briefly before leaving it on the doorstep. I called Jack, filled him in, and asked him to keep things quiet. Then I went to Home Depot for new locks. On my way back, I saw Tom's car in my driveway, with Rachel loading it up. I should have kept driving, but anger surged. I sped up, tires screeching as I turned into the driveway and slammed into the back of Tom's car. He jumped into the driver's seat, but I wasn't done. My front end hit his hard enough to wedge it against the garage door. I backed up, gave myself space, and floored it again, ramming his car through the door. Steam rose from under my hood, the engine struggling, but I backed up one last time. I floored it, though this time, my car barely nudged his. I was seething. I grabbed my son's aluminum bat from the garage and started swinging, shattering the windows and windshield. I was about to yank open Tom's door when I heard a voice shout, "Drop the bat and put your hands on your head," a police officer commanded. I froze, dropped the bat, and knelt as they cuffed me and led me to the patrol car. I watched as Tom, visibly shaken, climbed out. Rachel was in tears, talking to the officers and looking at me like I was a stranger. I gave her a cold, defiant smile. At the station, I was booked and given one call. Without hesitation, I dialed my brother, Jack. Because it was the weekend, I spent 2 nights in jail before my court appearance on Monday. I pleaded not guilty, and the judge set my bail. Jack managed to bail me out that afternoon. Alex, they're talking about attempted homicide, or at least assault with a deadly weapon, he said gravely. I know. First, take me to the bank, I replied. She's probably drained everything, but I need to see. Sure enough, the cash was gone, though the CDs and bonds were still intact. But a court order prevented me from accessing them. Couldn't you have left me $5, Rachel? You really are cheap, I muttered when she picked up the phone. I needed that money for me and the kids, she said coolly. Doesn't Tom make enough? I have a mortgage to pay, maybe a little fire in the living room to take off the chill. Alex, stop talking like that. You're only making things harder. You need to accept this and move on. I'll move on when you send my kids back home, I replied, my anger rising. I can't, especially not with your current attitude. After everything settles, you can see them. But Tom and I, you're done with us. With that, she hung up. I shook with anger. At my next court date, my attorney pled temporary insanity, arguing my actions were impulsive given Rachel's betrayal. Rachel and Tom claimed they'd feared for their lives and requested a restraining order. Mr. Bennett, the judge addressed me. Did you tell Mr. Carter he'd be leaving in a body bag? I don't remember my exact words, Your Honor. But wouldn't you feel the same if you caught a friend with your wife? My lawyer nudged me, urging silence. Alex, say nothing more. From now on, you remember nothing, he whispered, reminding me that we were building a case that I hadn't been in control of my actions. My boss, Chris, came as a character witness, testifying to my good nature and reliability on the job. Once the case closed, we waited for the judge's decision, which would take a few days. Back at work, Chris jokingly offered to hire a few thugs to make Tom and Rachel disappear. I declined, though part of me couldn't help but wonder what that would have cost. 6 months and $12,000 in legal fees later, I found myself empty-handed. Rachel got half of everything, including the house, which was to be sold. She also claimed her jewelry was missing and accused me of taking it. I countered that mine was gone too and suggested she'd taken it all herself. My attorney looked worn down after the judge's decision. "Alex, it could be worse," he said. "You could have hurt him and faced manslaughter charges. With good behavior, you'll be out in 8 months and your record will be clear in 2 years. Just do the time and move on." Easier said than done. I wasn't looking forward to being locked up 24/7, but after a final visit with my kids, I turned myself in. My sentence would be served in the county facility, and my brother put some money in my account, though most of the items I could buy there were junk. Without a cell phone or computer, I wrote down my thoughts on paper and made bi-weekly collect calls to my brother, my mom, and the kids. On one visit, Jack reassured me, "I'll have your car repaired before you get out, using the insurance payout. I'm taking care of your lawn and put in those deadbolts we talked about." Rachel came by and got the rest of her and the kids' clothes, but she left the furniture, as per the court order. "I'm looking out for you, Alex." I was grateful. Rachel let my parents see the kids every other Sunday, but wasted no chance to badmouth me, calling me their jailbird father and planning strict rules for me once I was released. My parents tolerated her for the sake of keeping a connection with the kids. Within a week, my visitation rights were confirmed. Every other weekend, a month each summer, and shared holidays. I notified Chris that I'd need a week to adjust after release. And as my sentence drew to a close, the thought of trading my orange jumpsuit for real clothes felt almost surreal. Jack was there to pick me up, and we drove straight to the nearest bar. To freedom. I toasted, clinking our bottles and downing the first of 3 cold beers. "Sam has a full steak dinner with all the trimmings waiting for you at home," Jack said. "You can stay with us a few nights, then sort things out at the house. It's still on the market, but no offers yet. Rachel wants to lower the price, but that'll need your approval." I just grinned, relieved to finally have a say in something. Dinner that night was incredible. I ate more than I had in 8 months, savoring every bite. I let myself relax, drinking more than I planned, 5 or 6 beers and 3 glasses of wine. It felt good to overindulge, to feel truly free again. The next morning, I woke up groggy, realizing it was past 10. After struggling to get up and make it to the bathroom, I wandered into the kitchen, where I found a note on the counter. "If you're reading this, you survived last night." The note left for me read, "There's coffee made, and everything else is in the fridge. Spare bathroom's got soap, a razor, shaving lotion, a toothbrush, and toothpaste. If you need anything else, we'll get it tonight. Your car and house keys are on the rack by the back door. Don't do anything stupid. See you around 5:30. My brother knew me too well. 2 cups of coffee and a muffin were all I could manage. After a shower and a shave, I felt almost human again. Jack had set out fresh clothes, and within an hour, I headed to my house. Sitting in my repaired car outside, I took a moment. The house looked the same, but inside everything was a mess. Clothes were strewn on the floor, the kitchen half cleaned, and the fridge still had old food. I saw the dent in the wall from that night when I'd punched it. I rubbed my knuckles, remembering the rage. Upstairs, the kids' closets were empty, save for a few mementos. My bedroom was nearly bare except for my dresser. Dark patches on the carpet marked where our bed and her dresser had been. The whole room would need a redo before I could use it again. At the bank, I confirmed Rachel had cleaned out the lockbox. I requested written proof and was told there were video recordings. My attorney filed a motion to get it all returned. "She's offering her share of the house in exchange for the CDs and bonds," he informed me later. "She'll follow the court order," I replied. "That's why I hired a lawyer, to protect my interests." Back at the house, I took inventory. I need a contractor to fix the walls and a cleaning service for the kitchen. With utilities still on, I could move back once I got a bed. At least I wouldn't be sleeping on the old mattress she'd shared with someone else. I found a decent queen-size set for $900. Hank, the contractor, came by that Saturday to give an estimate. Solid walls. Must have hurt when you hit that stud, he remarked with a grin. I just need the holes patched and a coat of white paint, I replied. How about $200? He offered. You did the neighborhood a favor with Tom. Randy even told Linda he'd put her in the grave if she ever pulled something like that. I thanked him, and he got to work right away. Within 6 weeks, the house was cleaned and repaired, and my CDs and bonds were back in the bank. Life was gradually getting back to normal. When my kids stayed for their first weekend, it was awkward, so I broke the ice. I know this is weird, but this is still your home. Say what you need to. I can take it. Ryan spoke up. Dad, we love you. We're sorry about what Mom did. Emma nodded in agreement. We didn't even know about Tom until Mom said we were moving to his place. I'm not happy about it either, but even without Tom, things wouldn't work with your mom and me. I'm still your dad, and I love you. I'll always be here. We hugged, then spent the evening with pizza and a movie. As much as I wanted to criticize their mother, I held back. Our first weekend together was a success, and we started to feel like a family again, albeit a different one. I got Ryan a decent haircut, went to work, maintained a small social life, and spent time with the kids. Ryan started soccer, Emma took up dance, both kept me busy. Everyone, except Jack, urged me to move on. You're still young, Alex. Find someone new, get married, start over. I just nod and tell them to forget it. I wasted 14 years on that witch. If I want to stay mad, that's my right. No one understood what I'd gone through over those 2 years. Sometimes you need to take a pound of flesh to make the pain go away, and that's what I was after, one way or another. When Rachel wanted to lower the house price, I refused. She wasn't happy, but I didn't care. Alex, it won't sell in this market at this price. We need to drop it by $20,000. If you want to give up $20,000 of your share, fine. Otherwise, the price stays. Eventually, we split the bonds and CDs. She spent her share on a new car and a vacation with Tom. I banked mine, starting a nest egg. 8.5 months after I got out, Tom's house mysteriously caught fire while they were at a soccer game. Someone had poured gasoline on the electrical box and rear of the house, ruining the back half and leaving them without power. The next day, 2 police officers came to my door. I went to the station, but they got nothing from me. I was at a neighborhood party with at least 10 witnesses. I told them confidently, Alex, you're only a block away. You could have done this, one officer accused. Prove it, I replied. After a while, I stood up. Charge me, release me, or I'm calling my lawyer. They opted to release me, warning they'd be keeping a close eye on me. Mentally, I checked off my list, 1 down, 2 to go. Since Tom's house was unlivable, I volunteered to take the kids. Repairs would take at least 2 months, so we had an unexpected vacation together. One evening, as Rachel came to pick up the kids, she muttered, I know you did it, no matter what the police say. I don't know what you're talking about, I replied. I was with friends. Too bad you and Tom aren't invited to anything anymore. I could put in a good word, I added sarcastically. Don't bother. We wouldn't go even if they begged us, she replied bitterly. Well, at least you have each other for now, I said with a smirk. What's that supposed to mean? She asked wide-eyed. Nothing. Just that you're lucky to have each other, I replied, smiling on the outside this time. The kids had started asking to spend more time with me, which didn't sit well with Rachel or Tom. I'd heard about arguments between Tom and the kids, where they told him he wasn't their father. Rachel accused me of stirring up trouble. Rachel, I don't badmouth you to the kids. You're their mother. I've told them to listen to you. What about Tom? She demanded. Him? He's a backstabbing idiot lucky to be alive, I said. Besides that, he's a decent guy, I added sarcastically. If looks could kill, Rachel would have buried me on the spot. Alex, stop badmouthing him in front of the kids. He's good to them, she insisted. Not going to happen. He's nothing to me, and I pray I get to piss on his grave one day. She glared at me. Not that I'd harm him, of course. Alex, so help me. What are you going to do, Rachel? Cheat on me? Divorce me? Put me in jail? Make my life hell? Oh wait, you already did all that. There's nothing more you can do to me. Go back to your husband and leave me alone. Without another word, she turned and left. I watched her go, shaking my head, wondering how I ever loved her. Work was going well, and I quickly got back up to speed. Chris soon had me take on 4 more accounts, which kept me busy. With no one at home, I had the time. After reaching out to my new clients, I planned 2-day trips to each location to learn their operations. 3 accounts were straightforward, but TW Incorporated was complicated. They were changing their process and needed monthly oversight. The lead engineer there was knowledgeable but disorganized, and I struggled to get the information I needed. Chris, if I don't get what we need, this will mess up their system, I said after 2 phone calls. Eventually, he assigned an intermediary to help me, and I started working with Samantha, who managed communications between me and the engineer. Samantha Reed, she said, shaking my hand on my first visit. She was a process engineer with 5 years at the company. We worked well together, and she got me everything I needed. 2 weeks before Phase 1 was complete, I decided to thank her. Samantha, I'd like to take you and your husband out for dinner. My treat. There's a great restaurant at the Hilton where I'm staying. How about 6? At 6, Samantha arrived alone. Where's your husband? I asked. Parking the car, she replied with a smile. Alex, I'm not married. Oh, sorry, I assumed, I said, noticing the rings on her hand. I wear these to keep things professional. Married women don't get hit on, and it helps avoid harassment issues. Plus, married people get promoted faster. They seem more stable. How do you explain company events? I asked, amused. I say he's on the road. They don't ask anymore. Well, you had me fooled, I said, and we had a great dinner. Over dessert, I found myself opening up about my last 2 years. I can't believe they did that to you. That really sucks, she said sympathetically. Tell me about it, but it's all in the past. I'm moving on with my life. I replied, though revenge still lingered in my thoughts. Alex, you're young, and there are plenty of women who'd love a guy like you, she said, smiling. You're probably right, but I haven't had the time or ambition to date again. I'm still a little cautious. Well, you did ask me out, didn't you, she teased. You and your husband, I corrected, laughing. But honestly, yeah, I would have asked if you weren't married. You're easy to talk to, and unlike my ex, you're not a complete pain. I'll take that as a compliment, she laughed. Dinner went well, and the next day, I left for home, planning to return in a month. I asked Samantha to keep me updated on any developments. We went out most nights when I visited, which was every couple of weeks. Though I still had trust issues, I was working on them. Our calls and emails kept us in touch between visits, and after a couple of months, we were kissing and eventually more. I finally felt ready to let someone new into my life. Was I becoming normal again? One Tuesday, after we'd been intimate, she mentioned she had a conflict the following Wednesday night. I thought nothing of it, even though I'd forgotten to bring any contraceptives. Alex, let's plan a whole evening together on Thursday, Samantha whispered, kissing me. Thursday, I'll remember to bring protection this time, I thought. On Wednesday, I looked for a new restaurant and found a well-rated Indian spot about 25 minutes away. Ready to relax, I ordered a beer and the sampler platter. Then I heard a familiar laugh, Samantha's. She was there with another man, clearly more than just a friend, holding hands and laughing. I lost my appetite, finished my drink, paid, and left. She didn't seem conflicted at all, I thought. I avoided her on Thursday, even skipping lunch. By 3, Samantha was at my desk, smiling and flirting. Did you take care of your conflict last night? I asked. Yes. And tonight you're all mine, she replied, still playful. I kept my tone flat. I found a cozy Indian place with a great sampler platter, I said, watching her expression. Her face paled as I continued. I was there last night. Saw someone I knew. Strange, isn't it? She froze, clearly caught. Alex, I can explain. No need. I got rid of one lying witch. I don't need another. I walked away, cutting my trip short. Ignoring her emails, I soon got reassigned, this time to work with a guy. Samantha had reinforced my trust issues. 3 months later, I got an early Christmas present. Tom was hit by a car while crossing the street. Witnesses only saw a black sedan with tinted windows, just like my BMW. That Saturday, the police came by, watched closely by my neighbor Tom. Mr. Bennett, could we have a word? Asked one officer. No problem, Tom. I'll catch up with you later, I said, turning to the officers. Mr. Bennett, do you own a black 2002 BMW 320i? Yes. What's this about? I joked about a parking ticket, but they didn't laugh. Is the car here? They asked. I led them to the garage. One officer took photos of the front bumper. Can you explain these scratches? He asked. Not a clue. After 8 years, nicks and scratches are normal. What's this about? A hit and run yesterday. Witnesses described a black sedan with tinted windows like yours. Just like a million other cars around here, I replied, annoyed. Did my license plate match, or did anyone see the driver? No, but your history with the victim made us check. Who was hit? I asked, playing dumb. Mr. Robert Carter. He's in critical condition. I barely hid my smile. Is he dead? No, but he's not doing well, they replied, leaving me to open a bottle of wine and celebrate. Tom's accident stirred up neighborhood gossip, with some saying, the guy can't catch a break, while others declared, he got what he deserved. I was on cloud 9. 2 days later, Tom's condition worsened, and he died. For the funeral, I wore a new suit, got a fresh haircut, polished my shoes, and had my car washed and waxed. When I arrived, the room fell silent. I ignored the guest book and walked directly to the casket. Rachel looked stunned. The kids gave me small smiles. As I reached Tom's casket, I spit into it, watching it dribble onto his shirt. Rachel screamed, hurling insults while I smirked openly. 2 down, 1 to go, I murmured to her. She froze, her fury replaced by fear. I warned you, I said softly, then walked out of the silent room. The police questioned me twice more at Rachel's insistence, but no one could prove anything. Just because it wasn't his car doesn't mean he wasn't involved, she claimed. But without more evidence, the case faded, and Tom's death became old news. I knew the next visit from the police was inevitable, and when they pulled up in front of my driveway, I locked up and waited, aware my neighbors were watching. At the station, one detective asked, Mr. Bennett, do you know David Kent? He held up a photo. Sure, I replied. How do you know him? The detective pressed. I hired him to watch my ex-wife. He's been working off and on for about a month. I explained, pushing the photo back to the detective. And why do you hire him? Ever since she took up with her late husband, she's had terrible luck. My kids live with her, so I hired David to keep an eye out, mostly at night. Well, the detective said with sarcasm, your ex-wife reported being followed. She saw Mr. Kent several times and called us. That's when we picked him up and found out you were involved. Mr. Bennett, this borders on harassment, and you could face charges if it continues, the officer warned. I'm just looking out for my kids. I don't care about my ex, but my children are different. If that's an issue, maybe your department can handle their safety. They warned me to back off and left, but I hadn't paid David to be subtle. I wanted Rachel to see him. My next hire was a guy who looked like he'd stepped out of a biker movie. He charged $30 an hour and worked 3 hours every 4th night. The effect was exactly what I wanted. If Rachel broke down, I'd have a chance at full custody. I wanted my kids back, even if it drove her to the edge. Alex, what the hell do you want? Rachel screamed over the phone. I want you to choke on your own spit and die. I replied calmly. She hung up, and I waited for the inevitable police arrival. When they did, I was ready. You're late, I said as they approached. Rachel had filed a complaint, but my lawyer was already waiting at the station. My client didn't threaten her, he explained. He expressed a wish, not a threat. Unless you have proof, you have no case. The officers reminded me that if anything happened to her, I'd be the first person they'd come after. Is there a way to end this? I asked my lawyer as we walked out. My client wants his kids back. If Mrs. Carter gives up custody, he'll back off, he said simply. The police had nothing to say to that, so we left. On Sunday morning, I was relaxing on the deck when the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, Rachel's parents were there, dressed for church. Alex, can we have a minute? Her father asked. Sure, come on in, I replied. Can I get you some coffee? No, thank you, her father replied as they sat down. He spoke first. Alex, we know Rachel didn't handle things right, especially with you going to jail and losing your family. But she's our only child, and we're worried. We don't want anything bad to happen to her. I nodded slowly. Look, I'm not out to hurt her, I said, but I want my kids back. They'd be better off with me. Considering the streak of bad luck she's been having, I'd hate for them to suffer if anything happened to her. They exchanged a worried glance. "We'll talk to her," her mother said, trying to smooth things over. "That's where you're wrong. The woman I married would never have cheated or left me to rot in jail. I don't recognize her anymore, except as the mother of my children. Frankly, I hope she has a miserable, painful end." They quickly stood, clearly uncomfortable. "Thank you for your time, Alex," her father managed, and they left without another word. I'd made my point. On Thursday evening, I finally got the visit I'd been expecting. It was just after 7, nearly dark. Rachel must have walked over, as I hadn't heard a car pull up. She looked furious as I let her in. "Come on in, Rachel. Want a drink? Acid hemlock on the rocks." I joked, closing the door. "Very funny, Alex. You really are a piece of work," she snapped, moving to sit down on the edge of the couch. "I want this place sold," she stated. "And I still own half of it, minus what I've paid since the divorce," I reminded her. "What's it going to take to drop the price?" she demanded. "An act of God," I replied coolly. "Unless you're covering the loss with interest. I just want you out of this neighborhood and away from me," she declared. "That's never going to happen," I said, enjoying her frustration. "You hate me that much?" she asked, almost bewildered. "More than you could possibly imagine," I replied evenly. "How it all went down was horrible, but I never planned to get involved with Tom. It just happened," she said, as if that made it better. "Nothing just happens unless you force it. Was he that much better in bed that you were willing to destroy our marriage and family? It wasn't about the sex, Alex. He needed me. He had no one else. We fell in love because we needed each other," she insisted. "So, it was charity work?" I asked sarcastically. "I needed you. Our kids needed you. Our marriage needed you. But you chose your needy puppy over us. Now he's dead, and he's a lot less needy." I couldn't help the smirk that crossed my face as I watched her expression. "I only wish I'd been the one driving that car," she said quietly. "Alex, you're so hateful. Taking pleasure in someone's pain is just sick." "Is it really sick, Rachel? Or is it just what you made me? You and Tom made this bed, and I'm just lying in it. 60% of marriages fail, Alex. Not everyone holds on to this kind of hatred," she said, almost pleading. "Maybe not, but I don't care about anyone else's marriage. This was ours." "How long was I the fool?" she asked. "Does it matter now?" "To me, it does," she said, her tone sharpening. 2 months? 3? 5? 5, I replied bluntly. She let out a shaky breath. "I never thought things would end this way," she muttered. "It didn't have to," I said coldly. "But you made your choice, Rachel. Now live with it. I'm not going anywhere. If you want to sell, that's up to you, but don't expect me to make things easy for you." She stared at me, defeated, then got up. Without another word, she walked to the door. I watched her go, feeling the last shreds of any old feelings dissolve. She was just the mother of my kids now. Nothing more. When she'd left, I poured myself a glass of wine, sat down, and thought back to everything we'd once had. It felt like a lifetime ago. Now all I wanted was my kids and the satisfaction of seeing Rachel realize that I wouldn't be going anywhere. The more she wanted me gone, the firmer I'd plant myself. She'd get no easy escape from me. Not now, not ever. It just happened the first time, and I almost told you. I was devastated, Rachel confessed, her voice rehearsed. "But you didn't tell me, did you? You weren't that devastated because it kept happening. How many times did you sleep with him in our bed?" I demanded. "Never. I wouldn't do that," she replied, anger flashing in her eyes. "So it was okay everywhere else?" I retorted. "You proved you couldn't be trusted, and most of our friends knew but didn't tell me. Where do we go from here?" "This house is our last connection," she said calmly. "What about the kids? I'm not giving them up, no matter what you say." "Alex, I know I messed up, but I still care about our family," she said, and her voice dropped to a whisper. "Are you threatening me? Me? Deprive my kids of their mother? Never. But if something should happen, lightning strike, accident, I'll make sure the kids remember you fondly. If you have any last requests, maybe write them down soon. You never know what might happen." I'd borrowed that line from a movie, and her eyes widened with fear. "I'm out of here," she said, standing. "We had 12 good years, and I'm sorry it ended like this." She leaned in as if to kiss my cheek, but I shoved her back. "Don't ever touch me again," I warned. "You make my skin crawl." Flustered, she turned toward the door. "By the way, that look you just gave me?" I called after her. Tom had the same look right before the car ran him over. Too bad I didn't have a camera. She turned pale and rushed away. In truth, I was the one who started the fire at Tom's house. 2 Gatorade bottles of gasoline and a lit cigarette were all it took. I made sure everyone was out of the house, slipped out a side door, went through the backyards, and got the job done in under 5 minutes. Tossing the empty bottles in a recycling bin, I strolled back into the party without anyone noticing I was gone. As for Tom's death, though, dumb luck, or maybe he was just in the wrong place at the right time. If he'd only looked both ways, he'd still be here. No matter what I say, Rachel and her family think I was involved, and in some ways, I almost wish I'd been the one. Rachel was probably locking her doors right now, thinking she'd be next. Am I going after her? No. I'll just keep dropping hints and innuendos until she cracks, and maybe then the court will give me back my kids. Meanwhile, any prospective homebuyer I meet will hear all about the neighborhood arsonist who hasn't been caught yet. I like living here, especially with my kids just up the street. Who knows, maybe when they turn 13, they'll want to live with their old man. I can hope. The one positive in my life these days is Laura. She works with the State Department of Corrections, and I met her through check-ins in my first year out of jail. Laura is tough, no nonsense, and kept our conversations all business until the year was up. Once we were free to talk more, we found out we shared a connection. She gets it. Told me she has trust issues herself after working with so many convicts who lie to her daily. Now we're both trying to move forward, opening up and learning to trust again. Laura got me thinking about what I've been doing since that 304 of a wife walked out. She showed me that my actions were holding me back from any real life or meaningful relationships. If you mess up and go back to jail, your rear is mine to do with as I please, she said, her smile both amused and a warning. And you know what? I believe her. Laura's not someone I would ever cross, and she's someone I can count on to never cross me either. I think, with her by my side, I'm finally ready to move on and open myself up to love again.